Post coming from TMZ saying breaking, Andrew and Tristan Tate have been arrested in Miami. The brothers, proponents of hypermasculinity who have millions of followers on social media, have been wanted in the United Kingdom, where they face rape and human trafficking charges. We also have this coming in from the Crown Prosecution Service, who has decided to bring additional charges against the brothers, Andrew and Tristan Tate. Following their arrest, prosecutors will seek extradition in relation to the original charges and the further charges they have authorized, with 7 further counts of rape, 3 counts of arranging or facilitating trafficking for sexual exploitation, 3 counts of assault and bodily harm, and 19 additional charges. The CPS deciding to prosecute Tristan Tate, who is 38 years old, with 1 count of sexual assault, 2 counts of rape, and 3 counts of arranging or facilitating trafficking for sexual exploitation. Breaking, Andrew and Tristan Tate have been arrested in Miami, with 7 further counts of rape, 3 counts of arranging or facilitating trafficking for sexual exploitation, 3 counts of assault and bodily harm, and 19 additional charges.
Andrew Tate has spent years telling his audience that the system is coming after him, that he's being targeted, that the allegations against him are part of a much bigger campaign. And for years, regardless of what you believed, there was always one thing Tate could point to. He was still free, he could travel, he could post, he could speak directly to millions of people, and he could tell his audience that eventually everything would be exposed in court. But now something has changed. Because on July 18, 2026, Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan were arrested in Miami by U.S. Marshals as British authorities moved forward with extradition proceedings. And this isn't simply another headline about Andrew Tate. This time, the legal battle isn't happening somewhere far away in Romania. It isn't just an investigation that has been dragging on for years. It's happening in the United States, while the United Kingdom is waiting on the other side. And that creates a problem Tate hasn't really had to deal with before. Because now the question isn't just, are the allegations true? The much bigger question is, what happens if Tate actually has to stand in a British courtroom and answer them? And there's another part of this story that's even more interesting. Because while Tate's supporters are arguing that he's being politically targeted, his own legal team is trying to keep him from being extradited. At the same time, Tate himself has repeatedly said that innocent people don't run from court. So which is it? Does he want his day in court? Or is the real objective to stop the extradition before that day ever arrives? That contradiction sits at the center of everything happening right now. And once you understand how we got here, the current situation starts looking very different. Because the Miami arrest isn't the beginning of this story. It's the latest chapter of a legal saga that has been building for years. And to understand why this moment could be the most important one yet, we need to go back to the beginning. Before Andrew Tate became one of the most recognizable and controversial figures on the internet, he was known primarily as a kickboxer. Then came something much bigger, the internet. Tate built an online persona around wealth, masculinity, relationships, discipline, and power. His audience exploded. And eventually, his business model became just as controversial as his personality. One of the most important pieces of that story was his webcam business. Tate has publicly talked about bringing women to London and involving them in webcam work. In one interview, he described recruiting girlfriends and later building what he characterized as a large operation. His public statements have since been cited in discussions surrounding the allegations against him. Now, here's where we need to be careful. A public statement about how someone operated a business does not by itself prove a criminal allegation. That's for a court to determine, but it does something else. It gives investigators, journalists, and the public something they can compare against the allegations. And that's exactly what happened. British authorities now allege that offenses involving Tate and his brother took place between 2010 and 2017. The Crown Prosecution Service says additional charges were authorized after receiving further evidence from Bedfordshire Police. Those new charges relate to 4 additional alleged victims. And this is where the story gets much more complicated, because Tate's defense has a completely different interpretation. According to his legal team, the allegations are false, politically motivated, and part of an attempt to damage him. So we're left with 2 completely different narratives. The prosecution says there is a case to answer. Tate says the case itself is the problem, and that disagreement has been playing out across multiple countries for years. In December 2022, Andrew and Tristan Tate were arrested in Romania alongside 2 Romanian women as part of an investigation into alleged human trafficking and related offenses. The case became international news almost overnight. But the most important thing about Romania wasn't simply the arrest. It was what happened afterward. The brothers spent months in custody before being moved to house arrest and later having restrictions eased. The Romanian proceedings continued, and throughout the entire process, Tate maintained that he was innocent and described the case as a setup. that defense has remained remarkably consistent. But there's an important distinction that often gets lost online. An investigation is not a conviction, an allegation is not proof, and a defendant claiming innocence is not proof of innocence either. Those three things can exist at the same time. That's why the legal process matters. The Romanian case has remained unresolved for years, while the UK case developed separately, and that created an unusual situation. Tate could continue arguing publicly that the allegations were false, while prosecutors in another country were continuing to build their own case. And eventually, Britain entered the picture in a much bigger way. In 2025, British prosecutors authorized charges against the brothers relating to alleged offenses involving rape, actual bodily harm, and human trafficking. Then, in July 2026, the situation escalated dramatically. The CPS announced 38 additional charges, bringing the brothers' combined total to 59 charges, 42 against Andrew Tate and 17 against Tristan Tate, according to British police. For Andrew specifically, the additional charges include 7 further counts of rape, 3 counts of arranging or facilitating trafficking for sexual exploitation, 3 counts of assault occasioning actual bodily harm, and 19 charges relating to indecent images of a child and extreme pornography. Tristan faces additional allegations including sexual assault, rape, and arranging or facilitating trafficking for sexual exploitation. And this is the moment when the story changed, because suddenly the question wasn't, will Britain ever pursue this? It was, how does Britain actually get him there? And that's why Miami became so important. On July 18th, the Tate brothers were arrested in Miami by U.S. Marshals. British authorities are seeking their extradition. The brothers are fighting that process. And right now, that extradition fight is arguably more immediate than the eventual criminal trial itself. Because before a British court can decide whether the brothers are guilty or innocent, they have to get there, and that's the legal bottleneck. The U.S. court isn't deciding, did Andrew Tate commit these crimes? Not yet. The immediate issue is whether the extradition process should move forward. That's a crucial distinction, and it explains why Tate can simultaneously say, I want my day in court, while his lawyers argue against extradition, because from his perspective there are 2 separate questions: should he be released from U.S. custody, and should he ultimately be extradited to Britain? Those aren't necessarily the same question. His lawyers have argued that he should be released while contesting extradition, pointing to his public profile and previous compliance with Romanian restrictions. U.S. prosecutors, meanwhile, have raised concerns including flight risk and public safety. And this is where the story gets really interesting, because Tate's public messaging has always been one of strength, control, confidence, defiance, but the legal system doesn't respond to internet confidence. It responds to procedures, documents, deadlines, court orders, and evidence. And right now, that's the battlefield Tate is entering. There's a line Andrew Tate has used repeatedly over the years: innocent men don't run. His supporters have used the same argument. If he's innocent, they say, let him go to Britain, face the allegations, and clear his name. And on the surface, that sounds simple. But extradition doesn't work that way. A person can believe they're innocent and still legally challenge extradition. A person can also want a trial while simultaneously arguing that the current detention or extradition process is unfair. So the debate we're seeing online is actually mixing together 2 separate issues. The criminal allegations and the extradition process, those aren't the same thing. And that distinction matters because the internet has a tendency to turn complicated legal questions into a simple binary, free Tate, or arrest Tate. But the actual legal system is much slower and much less dramatic. And that's precisely why this case could take months before we even get close to a courtroom in Britain. The UK has until September 16 to submit its full extradition request, while a US detention hearing is scheduled for August 13. So the next major battle may not be a criminal trial at all. It may be the fight over whether Tate stays in America or is sent back to Britain. And that brings us to the most controversial part of this entire story, because Tate isn't fighting this battle quietly. He's fighting it publicly. And his lawyer has become a major part of the story himself, because in the next part we're going to look at Tate's legal strategy, the pressure being put on American officials, and the increasingly political language coming from his defense team. And there's one particular argument that has raised eyebrows because it goes far beyond a normal extradition defense. It's an argument involving Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, and the political consequences of what happens to Andrew Tate. And once you understand that part of the story, the Miami arrest starts looking like much more than just another legal development.